Anyway, we're going to talk about the election of 2018 to see just what went wrong and what could be done about it. I'm Rosalie Schaefer, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County, I thank you for coming here today. Why did it take weeks before we learned who really won some key Florida elections? The recent election revealed some problem areas, such as lengthy ballots, confusing amendments made worse by bundling more than one issue in an amendment, made worse by problems with provisional ballots and signature matching of votes by mail. Going up a notch, there were plenty of problems with the federal level of elections, too. Our speakers today will provide their information and views about what went wrong and how it could work better. We're very pleased and honored to have with us today Michael Bennett, the Manatee County Supervisor of Elections. He's been our supervisor since 2012, when he was first elected. And before that, he also represented our county in the Florida House and Senate. Dr. Keith Fitzgerald, political science professor at New College of Florida, has also served in the Florida House. We had originally scheduled Dr. Frank Alcock, but he couldn't make it due to a death in the family. After their presentations, we'll have questions from the audience. Okay, let's get started. Forgot to add, we will have questions, and when you ask your question, please speak loudly because we don't have a floor mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. This crowd gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know that you didn't come down just to see me, but you did want to find out what happened to our election last time. And I do hope that Keith gets here. If y'all have not met Keith Fitzgerald, he's a great guy, very, very knowledgeable, super guy. When I was in the Senate, he was first elected to the Florida House. He's just really an outstanding individual. Get to know him if he gets here today. If he said he was going to be here, I guarantee he is trying to get here. He's just that kind of guy. He's a lot more fun than Frank, too. Actually, I like them both. But anyhow, let's talk about the election and what went wrong. Surprisingly, not a lot, okay? Compared to what was in the newspaper, not a lot. The problems that they had, especially Palm Beach is easy to talk about. Palm Beach is really in a bad way. The gal that runs the Palm Beach, her name is Susan Booker. I served with her in the Florida House. I used to hate it when Susan Booker stood up to wave her microphone because I know she wanted a debate against a bill that I was doing, and it was no good because I guarantee you she knew the bill probably better than I did. She's a very, very knowledgeable lady. But she's been fighting a problem down there that we have not fought in Manatee County. Her biggest problem down there is trying to get her county commission to spend the money to update the equipment that she's got. She has double the voters that we have in Manatee County and about half of the equipment, okay? So I hate to put any pressure or any heat on Susan Booker. She's really a good lady, very, very smart. She did the deal. Then you get down to Broward County. Broward has always been a problem. It really has. If you're going to have a voter fraud problem in Florida, it's going to be in Broward County. If you're going to have problems with absentees, it's going to be in Broward County. And what happens down there is you have such a wide, diverse population down there as they're trying to run the ballot. If you would have seen their ballot, and I know that you all saw our ballot because I just about have faith that everybody in this room voted. If you would have taken our ballot and looked at both sides, even with all the amendments, our ballot, if you'd have stretched it out, would have been about 3 feet long. Hers was over 8 feet long, okay? So now all of a sudden, you've got people going in and trying to correct a ballot. And with the constitutional amendments that were on there, it made it extremely difficult, especially in an area. Do I think she could have done better? Yes, and I've known Brenda for a long time. Here's Keith. I told you he'd show up. You can't get away with his bad penny. Come on up, Keith. I don't know how they're going to do this. I'm going to rattle off for a little bit, and I was just telling them good things about you. I take back everything that I said good about him, okay? The only reason I was saying good things about Keith before he got here is I was afraid he'd show up. So, but no, so when you look at Broward County, it's just a different deal. But when you think about it, in the state of Florida, 65% of the counties did it right, okay? 65 of us got it in, got the numbers, and it was over. There are some issues that we could change in the state of Florida on our elections that I think would make it better. But one, especially in Palm Beach County, they've got to fund the equipment that she needs, okay? Susan Booker is really, as I said before, a sharp gal, and it's really a shame that the newspaper beat her up so bad over something that she couldn't control. She did not have the equipment to do it. Broward County is just Broward County. If you're going to have an election problem in Florida, that's where it's going to be. And you put the heat on Brenda, but if you really look at the previous supervisor prior to Brenda, okay, she was let go for incompetence also, okay? Because, and I don't know that either one of them are necessarily incompetent, as you have such a weird, diverse population. Then you combine it with 17 or 16 or 15 continuous changing amendments on there, because not only did they have the statewide amendments, they had their local amendments. And so consequently, you end up with a ballot down there that's 8 foot long. Then you get into the problem of vote by mail. And I'm a huge proponent of vote by mail. Every one of you have heard me speak before on how important vote by mail is, and we have watched the turnout increase drastically because of vote by mail. We know in a general population election in Manatee County, if we get 14, 15, 16% turnout, that's a pretty decent election. But of the people who requested vote by mail, over 80% of those will turn it back in. Okay? They vote because they're sitting at home, they're discussing the ballot. We get a better educated voter, and by that I mean we get an education. I'm not talking about formal education. You get a better educated ballot because my wife and I are sitting there in the morning, we're discussing the ballot, our 3 kids are sitting there, they're hearing mom and dad discuss the ballot. All of a sudden they're learning, and the neat part about it is for some of us, we have the operation of having those young kids Google it. And they go, when we have the question, they go Google it. And so you get a better educated voter. And the fact that that ballot is sitting at home for a couple of weeks, they take the time to fill it out, send it in, and we get it. Which brings us to the problem of verifying the signatures. It's a problem, and I don't know an easy way to do it, but here's the real problem. The ones that come in with absolutely no signature on them, there's nothing we can do about it. There's no signature. If they come in and there's a signature that we can't verify, we immediately, in my office, we start with mail. We mail everybody, say, we've got a problem with your signature, please come down. You've got until Monday the 5th or the Monday at 5 o'clock before the election to fix it. Bring us some affidavit, mail us some affidavit. We've got a form they can fill out, and a lot of those people will take care of that. Some of them cause another problem, and the problem is that the ballot was sitting at home, and my wife and I both wanted absentee ballots, but she, being as cheap as she is, decides she's going to save 45 cents and put my ballot in with hers, okay? Can't do it, because then I can't count either one of those, okay? There's nothing I can do about those. Then the other one that comes in is she signed my ballot, and I signed hers, okay? When those come in, we have, and there's some question about doing it legally, but I do it anyhow, so some of you who've known me for a long time know I would much rather ask for forgiveness than permission anytime. So what we will do is take the ballot that she signed, which as we know is not her ballot, it's mine, okay? We will set that ballot aside, waiting for my ballot to come in that she's, or her ballot to come in that she signed. We mix them up, we realize they made a common error, we count them both, okay? We have worked with the canvassing board here, which is myself, the chairman of the county commission, and the chief judge or his appointee, and we work out, and we have agreed that we're going to count those ballots. We will do anything in our office to err on the side of the voter. There's some people in here who have worked with us on elections, and I wish more of you would. We do everything to err on the side of the voter, and I think that we will continue to do that. The ones that don't send in the information, there's not a whole lot we can do. If, you know, people have got to take a little responsibility for themselves, okay? And if you don't follow the rules, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. I can bend a little bit, and we can push it a little bit, but that's what we do. When those ballots come in, and I know that Randy Cooper, for example, has worked at our office many, many times, we do everything to verify that ballot and count it. But we also want to protect the secrecy of your ballot. And so we're very, very careful about that, that when those come in, the first thing that happens is her job is to slice the envelope. She's not allowed to open the envelope. She slices the envelope. She will pass the envelope to those two. We'll have a Republican and a Democrat or an independent. We'll have two parties represented. They will take the secrecy sleeve and the ballot out of the envelope. The envelope goes over here. The secrecy sleeve with the ballot goes over here. They will never, ever see each other again. I could not find my own ballot if I had to. There's no way I can find my own ballot because they go over. At the end of the day, we're going to count those envelopes. That's got to match up to the number of ballots we have, okay? If it doesn't, the search begins. But again, the problem is she dropped them both into the same envelope, so now we've got one more ballot than we do envelope, and we try to figure out what happens. Staff is very good at looking at those and trying to, because you can tell after you've processed 20, 30,000 of them that, hey, this one weighs too much, okay? There's probably two in there. We know it. We turn it to the canvassing board. There's nothing we can do about it, but we do catch them. And every once in a while, you get an empty envelope. Now, why somebody sent 45 cents to send me an empty envelope, I don't know, but they do it, okay? Because they want to show on the record that they did vote, because when that comes in and they scan it, they've officially voted. So that's where we're at. Signature mismatches, we do everything we can to get the people to come down. State of Florida says we don't have to do it, but one of the things we do in our office is, as time allows, we get on the phone. Unfortunately, or fortunately, most people don't have their phone numbers on there. But we do take the time to research, try to find a phone number, contact people, say, look, we've got your ballot down here. You didn't sign it. Can you please come down, send us the information we need? So we really work on it. We really don't reject that many when you think about the number of ballots that come in. You get in 80,000 of them, and you reject maybe 25, 30, okay? Very small number that we actually reject. The provision to cure it, we send out an affidavit, ask for some identification, ask that they sign the affidavit that they did, in fact, sign that ballot, and we have that on record. This time, of course, with the recounting process, it went extremely smooth in Manatee County. I have an unbelievable staff over there. They took care of it. We had no issues with the recount. We finished everything on time, actually everything a day ahead of time. Before when it was required, we got it done, so we had no issues there. If you ever get a chance to talk to anybody else in the staff, or if you ever work down there, you will realize Manatee County is extremely lucky with the staff that I was left by Bob Sweat. We've done real well. Issues on the ballot design, how they design that down in Broward, there's no way in the world I can justify that. It's not. I mean, the statute's pretty clear, okay, on how it was set up. Again, she just didn't have the staff. She didn't do it right. She didn't supervise it and didn't review the things. There's nothing you can do. Our ballot had no issues. It followed the rules and regulations. Some people say, well, why is the Republican candidate for governor listed first? Years ago, and in fact, as the Democrats had control when they did it, they changed the statute that whatever party the governor is representing goes first on the ballot, okay? It's been that way forever. If y'all want to do a petition to change it, it's fine with me, okay? But it's a statute layout, and that's how we have to lay out the ballot. Amendment 4, there were some questions on Amendment 4. Amendment 4, in fact, I made a presentation this morning on Amendment 4. It's something that I worked on when I was in the legislature. It should have been done a long time ago. It's really a shame that it had to go to a constitutional amendment. I think every amendment that was on the ballot this year was something that the legislature should have handled. They didn't have the political fortitude to do it. But it's done. It's done now, as far as I'm concerned, in Manatee County. We started enrolling everybody immediately, and we'll continue to do that. We've had a grand total, I believe, of 51. We've had 57 applications of people who were former felons, who were convicted of a felony, who wanted to register to vote. Most of those we were able to handle. There's still some slight confusion, but I'm asking the governor's office, I asked the Senate president this morning, do not let it go to the legislature. It's a self-acting thing that the Secretary of State's office, the Division of Elections, should be able to clarify what needs to be clarified, because there are some issues that need to be clarified. For example, you cannot get out of a sex crime, okay? You cannot get out of a murder. The problem is what's a sex crime? And to you all, it's very clear, well, if there was a rape involved, it's a sex crime. But it's also a sex crime in the state of Florida, the fact that I was 17 and my girlfriend was 16, okay? It's called a Romeo and Juliet. Well, I don't think that that's really what we meant by a sex crime, but it is a sex crime in the state of Florida. It should be clarified by the Secretary of State's office what it is. Murder is real simple. You shoot somebody with a gun, that's murder. But it's DUI manslaughter is a conviction of murder, but an overturn later on. We actually have one of those that we're processing right now, trying to figure out what to do with it, because the way that the statute says if they were convicted of murder. Okay? Well, it just so happened after about 6 years, this person's charge was overturned. Okay? But there's no clarification in there that, you know, that the appeal made it correct and it was done. So we're still working some of those minor issues. We went ahead and registered this person. Again, I would rather err on the side of the voter, and I'll ask for apology later on. But we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote. It's a great thing to do, and we should do it. I think on Amendment 4, what happens now, I think that the Secretary of State's office will clear it up a little bit. We're hoping that they will come up with these, but what we don't want it to do is go to the legislature for an enacting clause. We will be there another 2 years, and so we don't want to do that. And let's see, why don't we do this? Let me have Keith talk a little bit, and then probably both of us just answer questions, whatever we want to do. So I would like to introduce my good friend. He's on the wrong party, but he's been thinking wrong all of his life. My good friend, Keith Fitzgerald. Keith?
Thank you very much. Just to self-introduce a little bit, I have sort of an odd role in our community and the state of Florida. I am professionally a professor of political science at New College of Florida, and my specialties include democratic theory and American political development. Neither of those are thought of as particularly practical kinds of endeavors. But I also have run for office for the state House of Representatives. Won 2 out of 3, not a bad record. And I ran for Congress, 2 for 2 in this area, not bad for a Democrat. But I have a lot of practical experience, and I should say that over the years I've also been an official in various different capacities for the Democratic Party, just so you know. I think we all should acknowledge where we come from and what potential biases that we're aware of. There may be others. I always enjoy having joint appearances with Mike Bennett, partly because we always shock people by agreeing on a lot of stuff. No, seriously. And I think the reason we agree on a lot of stuff is that while we're members of our party and we have fundamental differences of opinion on a lot of things, we both sort of shoot straight and look at problems for what they are and try to be practical in trying to solve them. And it turns out if you do that, you can have a lot of overlap. And plus, he's amusing, and sometimes people say I am too. I was at an appearance right before this, and the reason I was late is they kept asking me questions and questions and questions. So here's the deal. I'll pay back being late by being potentially entertaining and amusing. Maybe. We'll see. So I thought what I would do is, I don't want to run over all the same territory that Mike just did, because first of all, he was right on the money on just about everything. Just about. It's always the way it goes. And, so there's no reason to repeat all of it, but I will address each of these issues serially. I like to try to put things in a really broad context, just for the purpose of being thoughtful. So let's talk about, just for a second, where we are historically as a people. The United States is an unusual country in that it started on the basis of a great deal of exclusivity about who was supposed to participate, but on principles that were inviting to democracy and inclusion. And so it gave people an opportunity, as there were challenges to the exclusions, to say, okay, we'll let you in, but we have some rules, and we're going to follow these rules. And that's been an excellent, excellent model as we've expanded from a largely rural, agrarian, commercial society where only landowners and a few other privileged elites were allowed to participate. And in fact, some people were allowed to own others as property, to a society that aspires to include everyone as a participant in the political process. And I say aspire because we haven't achieved that. But one of the specific challenges that has happened in that process episodically is we have conflicts over who should be allowed to participate, and whether we should be erecting barriers to participation because some of these new people or different people we don't think should belong, or whether we should be working hard in everything we do to be inclusive, so that everyone has a chance to participate. Elections and voting are only one slice of participation. It's just makes my heart swell that Mike Bennett, is a member of the other party, expresses over and over again he wants to make decisions that are more inclusive, because we will solve our problems as a society and adapt to the changes we're going through if we follow those fundamental rules of inclusivity, both specifically and generally. We want, that was sort of a wordy way of saying that what we want and what works and what's distinctive about the United States is that everyone who's willing to play by the rules is invited to the table. And that certainly starts with elections. And I think that value ought to be kept in mind in all the things we think about related to this topic. We're trying to get people involved. If you look at the academic research on the quality of engagement of average citizens, we're not supposed to talk about this in public because it gets us in trouble. It's not a pretty picture. A lot of people are not engaged. They don't understand the process. They have a lot of sort of general anger, not specifically focused on anything. That's why a lot of them don't vote, and it's why they're susceptible when they vote to populist appeals of people who generally give voice to discontent but don't really have constructive ways of moving us forward as a people. You can sort through that and think about who I might be talking about, but it's not a good thing because we are a special project here in the United States of America. We're about something. And that project has always been this challenge: is can we give voice to a great number of people and work collectively to solve problems? And we've always said, yes, we can do that, and we do it by letting everyone bring the gifts that they have to participate. And that starts with voting. We want everyone who can vote to vote and for their vote to make a difference. And that's the way you overcome that cynicism and disengagement. So that sort of stands behind this whole topic. It's a big deal. It has to do with the whole health of the American project. And, if you want to talk about the history of this, I know a great deal about it, and it's sort of interesting. It's not a perfect picture. It's a work in progress. So when we look at these specific problems, the kinds of issues I just talked about, or the big picture, actually does come up time and time again in these specific things. And I think we've got to frame it that way. I will go through those same items, but I'm not going to try to repeat everything that Mike talked about. Let me start first with saying how delighted I am, and this is sort of a, kissing up to you guys, but how great it was the League of Women Voters took a role of leadership in passing Amendment 4. So good for you all. About 25% of the African American male population of the state of Florida is excluded from participation in government. That cannot be a good thing. We don't solve our collective problems by marginalizing one voice who needs to be in the conversation, whatever your views may be. The value of democracy is that you have a robust conversation with a variety of different points of view, and you invite everyone to participate in the evaluation of the different points of view and to focus on constructive solutions to problems. And you don't get that to work, you don't get a real democracy if you're marginalizing whole groups of people. And I think that stands behind a lot of this stuff. Beyond the specific issues that you asked me to talk about, I can talk about some ways that we can move forward, if you want to be imaginative, in achieving those goals. Vote by mail has a great record in the states that have adopted it as the universal form of voting. As Mike said, not only does participation go up, but by various different measures, the quality of participation goes up as well. And look, I'm about as political a junkie as you get. I get the ballot, and they have some judge races in there, and I go, geez, I have no clue who these people are. Now, I'm not standing there in the voting booth going, geez, I just didn't even know this race was going to be on the ballot. And most people are going, I don't know what this judge thingy does. It's some kind of a judge, I don't know. Okay, we've got the internet, and you've got a ballot. So most of us would talk to friends, somebody has put up something on the internet, and people can do some research. And so that's one of the many things about. Yes, among the groups who do a really nice job of providing good information and with a strong effort to be unbiased is the League of Women Voters. In fact, they lead on that. So, it's a good thing. And as I say, I personally would like to have us think about just going to this as the way we vote in the state of Florida. It's done in other places, and it's worked. Does it cause some challenges for supervisors of elections and so forth? Of course it does. But it can be done. It has been done, and I think it has real benefits. Another thing, by the way, is it gets people talking to each other about these elections. And, when I say that the value of democracy is the value of the discussion that happens, if you're talking to your neighbors about, hey, what do you know about this one? You're actually improving your job as being an informed citizen, and we're all going to benefit from that process. So that's something there's done research on. So there are hidden benefits to voting by mail I think we should look at. This question of a provisional ballot cure process, Mike talked about it. There's got to be a better way generally, and I don't know what it is, to make this a less. So, again, back to this context, there's a great deal of suspicion in the public, some of it deserves, some of it not, about how we referee these contests. The whole provisional ballot cure process is going to raise suspicion whether it's merited or not. So we've got to figure out a better way of handling this whole thing, and I can't tell you I know what it is. And the same thing for the recounting process. I don't know if Mike said this, but part of what happened is we had that debacle after the 2000 election, and the entire country looked at how we did this stuff. And the legislature, as it is prone to do, rushed in with a solution. And it set up a timeline for how the supervisors are supposed to count the vote that in many cases is simply unrealistic. So it was addressing a specific problem, and now it's a mounting problem. Because first of all, we have a lot more voters than we did in 2000, shockingly. Participation rates are up among as well as the population. So again, we need to relook at the legislation that governs that. There's got to be a balance between timely calling of the elections and giving people the right timeline to actually do their job. And this is one where, again, I'll defend my friend, the warm and cuddly Susan Bucher. I say that's a joke between Mike and I because we know her. And she is a pit bull. Republicans sort of loved to hate her when I was in the legislature because she was the hardest working member, and I'm not exaggerating. She read every word of every bill, and she would just beat them up if she thought something was amiss. Even if she didn't know what it was, she just suspected. She was so diligent and so hardworking, and she would really get under their skin, but it improved the whole process because she was the watchdog. This is the woman who's doing the Palm Beach County vote. And so I sort of defend her because even though she's not a warm and fuzzy person, she is the most dedicated public servant you're going to find. And she's gone, this is something we have to think about. She has to depend on the county commission to provide her with the right equipment and the right personnel to execute her job. And they have not done it. And there's a record of this, of her going, saying, I need new equipment and more people year after year after year, and they didn't respond. And so when there were problems in counting the vote there, everybody says, oh, you know, these idiot election officials don't know how to get this done. That's, you know, so let's just face that. Either the counties need to have supplements from the state to address the specific problems that they have, or we just need to make the county commissioners do their jobs and allocate sufficient resources, because, you know, we're blaming individuals for a problem that they not only didn't cause, but you know, tried to fix. So understand where that comes from. And, you know, the entire process is sort of antiquated. We have new technology that we can be using. And I think this is the role of the state in all of this, is we need to have a serious investment in, first of all, just looking at what's out there, and then possibly pushing some innovation. And one of the things you do is you use the powers of the market. You put up you know, grants saying or a call saying we want this and that kind of outcome. You come with your proposal, and guess what? Some entrepreneurs will come if they can make money off the deal. We're not really doing that, and we should be. So if you want better technology, you got to put your money where your mouth is and do things that will make it happen. The ballot design thing, there's, you know, there are standards out there. They're published. The supervisor of elections down there and her staff just blew it. They just didn't follow the rules. And, you know, I don't want to make this a partisan thing, but, you know, Senator Nelson is a friend of mine. And he probably would have won this election if they had designed that ballot right. It made that much of a difference. So, and it was done by a Democrat and affected a Democrat. And, you know, that sort of makes you wonder if we shouldn't have some kind of process. First, I want to talk about how we choose the supervisor elections. I won't go on because I know you're probably tired of hearing us talk. We got to think about that. You know, are we picking people through a political process on a partisan basis? Is that the right way to choose the referee in the election? And I think one of the things we need to have is either the supervisor herself or a chief of staff or some person in the hierarchy should really have to be credentialed to show that they have competency in the issues that a supervisor will have to deal with, many of which are technological or procedural or what have you. And, you know, I think Mike's done a good job. I don't live up here, so you all can tell me I'm wrong afterwards quietly because we don't hurt his feelings or make him upset. I know that my supervisor election, who's a member of the other party, Ron Turner down in Sarasota, does a great job. Democrats are very happy with him because they haven't had any legitimate complaint. So some of them do a great job. Partisanship doesn't get in the way, but we live in an era of a great deal of suspicion. I think we ought to think about some kind of credentialing so everybody knows that the person gets that job on the basis of competence. And I just strongly believe that this should not be a partisan office. We should make supervisor elections nonpartisan. And I think there are ways to do that at the county level. A friend of mine had a suit against the county commission in Orange County because he thought that they made races nonpartisan as a personal effort to get at him because he's a Democrat and most people voting are Democrats. And he's right, it was personal, it was directed at him. But you know what? Although he's a buddy of mine, I think it's probably a good rule to say the referee should not be wearing the uniform of one of the teams in the contest. So I think that's something we need to think about. And you know, you have the same people run. They shouldn't do it on a party label. I think it increases the odds you're going to get some trust in the process. And again, you know, on the last of your bullet points, great, we did Amendment 4. I appreciate that comment about we're just going to have some problems. We always do. That's okay. And I would urge the state and everyone else to err on the side of letting people vote. This whole thing of how we define sex crimes is actually goes beyond this because we fail to differentiate between the true predators who do awful things and dumb young kids who make mistakes. And that has a lot of injustice into it and causes some real problems. So I think we need to think about that generally. And people who are in that business, who are very much advocates of being tough, agree with that point of view. They think sort of degrading the differentiation between kinds of crimes actually makes it harder to focus on the real problems. Let me just say back, you know, in closing, there are some other big things that we can do to improve elections in this country. I'll say something that I might shock a little bit. I think one of the things that we can do is come up with some new rules that will make it harder for the two political parties we have to maintain the duopoly that controls the political system here in the United States. The two-party system served this country pretty well for a long time. I don't think it's adequate anymore. It's not doing the job. There's not an easy solution to this, but there are some tricks in districting and so forth could create possibilities that third and fourth parties might get a few members of the legislature, say here at the state level. And we can do that, and I can talk about that. It would increase participation if we had more competition on the edges. And, you know, I'm a member of my party, and I wouldn't switch, I don't think, if there were other options. But a lot of people are dissatisfied. They need to have a voice, and they're not happy with this system. And I'll stop on that, and I can say more on those kinds of issues.
I actually hate agreeing with him. It just kills me to agree with him. It really does. It's just a personal thing. But let me, you know, a couple of things you're talking about. Let's talk about the party politics that go into supervisor elections. I've advocated for years before I ever got elected, and I advocate now. It should be a non-partisan issue, okay? Now let me tell you another problem that we've got. Roughly 30% of the people in Manatee County don't get a say in who's going to be the candidate, okay? Because more and more people are signing up as independents, okay? They're signing up no party affiliation. In the state of Florida, we are going to have to address this sooner or later. We've got to change the voting system. Now, when I stand up here and talk about it, believe me, I'm going to irritate the hell out of every Republican up there. I'm going to irritate the hell out of every Democrat who got elected, okay? But when you think about 30% of the people in Manatee County did not get a say in who was going to be the Democrat representative or the Republican representative. They got nothing. So I would challenge the League of Women Voters. Right now there are 2 petitions floating around the state to try to open up our primary system, okay? I would encourage the League of Women Voters to not only get behind it, but to advocate for it and do the same effort you did with Amendment 4 to change our system. You've got 30% of your friends and neighbors who are not getting a chance to say. I mean, I would tell you, most people I know were not 100% happy with either candidate that were on the presidential. The Democrats weren't 100% happy with theirs, the Republicans weren't happy with theirs, okay? But guess what? 30% of the people did not get a say. And what we've got to do is figure out how we're going to change this system. And it's people like the League of Women Voters who can do this. You have got the organizational abilities to do it. You've proven it time and time again. So I know I'm speaking to a group down in Miami, I believe it's next month, on pushing for this. And I know that I'm going to irritate a lot of my Republican brethren. And I'm a very proud Republican, just as Keith is a very proud Democrat. But on the same token, we both know that we could do better. Okay? So I would challenge the League of Women Voters to get behind those petitions and do the same thing that you did with Amendment 4.
Yeah, let me speak to that because I'm very happy to hear that, and I agree with it. When I was in the legislature, I co-sponsored a bill to have open primaries in the state of Florida. Now, you know, if I think about myself 20 or 30 years ago, I would have said, no, you know, we need parties. You need to give people incentives to get involved in their parties and for the parties to speak with a voice. Well, that's still a problem because the parties are too much controlled by, you know, small groups of powerful people. But hey, that ship has sailed. And Mike's right. You're just excluding people from the process. So we need to have open primaries. And I don't know how he feels about this one, but I would personally also endorse day of the election registration. We've got to stop, construct fewer barriers to participation. The more we can get people active in the political process, the less disaffected they'll be. And the open primary thing, the 2 parties, let's face it, neither one of them are particularly responsive to the people. They're responsive to the cluster of groups who control their finances. That's just the way it is. That is not the definition of a democracy. So I think it's a small step. Other states do it. Let's have open primaries. And I would throw into the mix considering day of the election registration as well.
Questions from the audience?
Sure.
Yeah, it'd be easier if you would do it from the microphone. That way we won't have to remember what it asked and repeat it.
Hi, I'm Jane Plitt and a proud member of the Manatee League. And first I want to salute our supervisor and the Board of Election. I was there monitoring how they were processing the provisional ballots. And what Bob has presented is absolutely true. They made every effort to count as many of the ballots as possible. However, my question to you was that someone else was monitoring for Senator Nelson, and he indicated that in Sarasota, the decision was made that if you didn't come with the proper identification, you were not given a provisional ballot. How do we create more consistency between the various counties on how they handle provisional ballots?
It's a good question. Not one I can easily answer because there are so many individual issues that come up when you're trying to do this, and without having been there for that particular one, I don't know. We did not have that problem up here. I know that Ron Turner runs a great organization down there, so I would be surprised if there was any conflict. I'm not saying it doesn't. I mean, we had some conflicts with some of our own precincts where people say, well, no, you can't have a provisional ballot, or you have to sign a provisional ballot. What happens on the deal, when we do an election, I hire approximately 1,000 poll workers, okay? And we do a lot of training. But when you've got 1,000 people out there and they come in for their 3, 4, 5 days of training, whatever it is, it's very easy for them to get out there and get confused. Let's face it, I don't hire necessarily young college kids, we end up with a lot of people my age, okay? And some of us don't. Where was I supposed to be? You know, at least I was here on time today, but the kid didn't do it. So, no, I don't know what that issue was, but we do pretty much have rules and regulations that are set down by the division to normally handle that. A particular case could easily come by. If it happened in his office, I guarantee it also happened in ours. We tried to fix it. I mean, we had people complain because all of our deputies for the last 20 years wear a red hat and says deputy on it. You cannot believe the number of people who complained this year, hey, your guys were out there with red hats, they were promoting Trump. We weren't promoting Trump. It was the same hats I've had for years. So you see these issues. But
Gentlemen, John Severini. So 2 questions. I guess first one, Mike, for you. You talked about an 8-foot-long ballot, which is just ridiculous, and then even a 3-foot-long ballot here seems pretty challenging. What are some potential solutions for that? And then my second question is for either of you gentlemen. I'm a big supporter of ranked choice voting. The state of Maine passed that. Thank you. We're actually trying to make that happen in Sarasota. I'm working with a group down there to do that. And I think I'll let these gentlemen explain it, and maybe Keith, you could talk to that and how it could help bring third parties into the mix. So start with the length of the ballots. What's the solution?
well, the Constitutional Revision Commission was the issue, okay? And the Constitutional Revision Commission should have never happened, but it'll continue to happen, a Constitutional Revision Commission, when you have legislators who are, here's the problem with some of the issues. For example, I believe that we should get rid of the mandatory minimum for criminal sentencing. I believe it passionately. I worked on it when I was in the legislature. Here's the problem. Keith is on my side. Let's get rid of it. But what we're both afraid of is the next time we run for election, she's going to run and a flyer against me, Bennett is soft on crime. So consequently, it never gets addressed, it never gets touched. That's the shame of it. So some of these issues should have been done, but you need a legislative body and hold them accountable. And unfortunately, we all know, and I've been there, I've run opposed, I've run unopposed, okay? Very, very hard to defeat a sitting legislator because of the way that our political system is run. If we went to either ranked choice voting or open primaries, I'd probably go with either one, you would find that the far right and the far left would have to start working closer to the middle because they need that 30%. Okay?
Thank you.
So they would have to move to the middle.
Right.
And you wouldn't have the far left wackos electing their wacko, and you wouldn't have the far right wackos electing their wacko. They would have to move toward the middle and not make some of the outlandish promises that they're doing to get through their primary system. So that's the reason I'm for it.
Yeah, and I am very passionately in favor of ranked voting. Okay, so here's how it works. It's really simple. And, you know, if you're in a club that has Robert's Rules of Order, this is an option that you can use. It's not some exotic new thing. It's been around for a long time. Well, you go in, instead of saying, this candidate gets my vote, and that's the end of it, you actually have a bunch of names there, and you get to rank them in order of your preference. By the way, some people say, well, you know, what if you're sneaky and only vote for one? And then you want that weight, more power to you if you're smart enough to know how to do that. It's not a big deal. Because what happens is, once you get through the first round, whoever came in last in top choices just gets eliminated. And you do this through rounds until you get the most preferred candidate as the winner. Isn't that a shocking idea? You know, because when you have first past post, that is, you know, whoever wins a plurality of a single round, the chances of getting the least preferred candidate as the winner are actually really high. Because it might be somebody who's hugely divisive, but has a very strong following. And they're all going to vote for that person. Think about, say, a primary process where you have bunches of candidates, and one candidate really is not preferred at all by the party, but consistently gets 30%. Gosh, I wonder if we could think of any examples of that. Was this the most preferred candidate in that party? No, it was not. Rank ordering allows you to address that. And let me go to this, because Mike's last point is really important. all around the world where you've done this, it makes the parties that exist more competitive because they always have competition on the left. And then when they govern, they got to be thinking, look, we might need to form a coalition of the two major parties because, you know, between the two of us, we only have 55% of the members of the district, of the legislature. It's also more representative. Right now we have a problem that with gerrymandering, you know, 52% results in 67% of the seats in state after state after state. And I'll criticize the Republicans for that, but I'll tell you, if you look at states where Democrats are in charge, they do it too. Because it's a competitive process. You're going to try to rig the rules to help you. Rank order voting does that. And there's another magical thing you can do with this, is if you make districts a little larger, say instead of having 120 single-member districts in the state House of Representatives, you had 3-member districts that were bigger, you would definitely find some third-party candidates winning some of those seats. Because one of the reasons that people don't vote for a third party when they actually prefer it is they feel like they're throwing their vote away.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to vote for that. It'll help the guy I really dislike win. Okay? If you can rank order your votes and you know 3 of them are going to win, you might get your person in. Same thing with, say, African Americans who say, you know, may never win a seat in Manatee or Republican County or Sarasota Republican County if you have at-large single members. If you have 3 people running for that seat, African Americans who say, you know, our interests are not likely to be represented, we're putting our guy number 1 every time. Okay, you know, they're not going to get 50% of the seats, but they're going to get a reflection of what their preferences and concerns are. So it's just great from a lot of different, and you know, it is one of the solutions we can do right now to address the duopoly of the two parties who've grown intransigent and, you know, they hate each other and they fight each other and blah, 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 but they're actually conspiring with each other to keep any competition out. And we have to stop that.
Thank you both, gentlemen, so much. If anybody's interested, I'll be in the back later. I challenge you, just Google ranked choice voting. The state of Maine passed it. 12 cities in this country do it. Many countries around the world do it. We're trying to get Sarasota to do it, and hopefully the rest of Florida. But I'll be in the back later to answer any questions, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Sheets, Chair of the Voter Services Committee for this league. And am I not talking into here? Okay, I thought we were recording. Anyhow, the State League of Women Voters has spearheaded a coalition which is looking at changes in the election laws. They have started the meetings. They're talking about what things to present to the legislators this year. So yes, we are on it. It's the same, very much the same coalition that worked on Amendment 4. So we're getting it moving.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Pepper, and I had 3 questions, but you dealt with gerrymandering a little bit. So speak up. Can you hear me? Okay. Money seems to govern who gets elected. It's happening in the federal, and unfortunately, my perception is in Sarasota, Manatee County, he who has the more dollars in their war chest gets elected. Therefore, we are bypassing a lot of very qualified candidates who simply don't have the funds to do it. Question is to you gentlemen, is there a way to solve the problem by getting rid of the large contributors who are essentially buying candidates to do what they want? My second question has to do with Sunday voting. It seems as though over the years there has been a dissolution of the ability for minority groups in particular to go to church and then get on a bus and go to the polls to vote. Has that been fixed in Manatee County?
We did one Sunday in Manatee County. I cannot do the second one. It takes such a huge effort for our staff to get ready for it. But we do have, in fact, as in Florida law, you have to have one Sunday open for early voting. I'm proud to say that I was the sponsor of that. But I was also the sponsor to extend the hours of early voting, because what I was concerned about is if the precincts were closing at 5 o'clock, the people who were commuting here from Tampa and St. Pete couldn't get there in time, and so we extended the voting hours. But as far as the Sunday morning, in Manatee County and in Sarasota, it's never really got the movement, if you would, of some of the other counties in this state where they did the souls to polls type busing and type thing. They've never been able to get it to work here. I don't know why. I've met with the Democrats. I've met with a lot of different people, church groups, and they said, well, just can't get it going. So I think that if the protests were there, if we knew that it was going to happen, we'd probably open for it. But they don't. And so there's, one of the things that I've tried to do in Manatee County, if you've looked at the numbers, our turnout numbers have increased every year that we've been there. And at the same time, I've never asked for a budget increase since I got elected, okay? Well, say, how do you do that? Well, the first thing we did is we had to get rid of some precincts that were truly non-performing. There was nobody showing up there. Okay, so you have to manage it, and you got to manage the money. Susan Booker, who we were talking about earlier in Palm Beach County, by law, the county commission has to fund the supervisor election. Have to. And why she hasn't, because she is such an aggressive girl, why she has not sued the county over there, I really don't know. But I have suggested to Susan, sue them. They have to fund, they have to buy you the equipment you need. So, but that's where we're at. So I doubt if you'll see us expand our Sunday. We were going to do it, we're still talking about it right now, in the next presidential election. This time we did it twice, and in the next presidential election we will again too, but probably not in the congressional races.
And let me just say that I think part of the disillusionment and even the willingness to entertain the idea of supporting authoritarian candidates in this country, from the local level to the presidency, derives partly from the sense that the government is working at the behest of a small sector of the society who controls the political process by paying the bills. And I think the reason people have that suspicion is that it's largely true. And so we need to deal with this problem. I don't know, we've tried to do this with campaign finance reform. That's sort of like trying to stop a fire hose by putting your mouth on it, in a way. So I think you might want to think upstream. First, let me just say that I think that Citizens United was a patently, obviously wrong decision. But people can step up and take care of that in state law and so forth. I actually think the legislation that led up to it was false. Buckley versus Vallejo, I think is the name of it. But we can't just take that. We've got to figure out ways of doing this. Some of the openness, for example, with rank order voting, you see how that nips the bud at the source, because that candidate who really has some great ideas, but people don't think they can win because they're not backed by the big money guys, suddenly has a chance. So, there are other things than just campaign finance reform that we can do to re-democratize democracy. Because this is a problem first of all, it's a violation of the core fundamental values of the United States. But what has made us great is our openness and willingness to include everybody in the process. It strengthens the legitimacy of the process, and you get better policies. And this campaign financing through big money contributions is corrupting. Not in the sense that Michael backed me up on this. It's not that anybody walks into your office and says, "Hey, if you'll vote this way on this bill, I'll give you." No, it's not that. It's just, who are you mingling with? Who are you interacting with? Who's calling you on the phone? And when you go back to the district to interact with voters, who are you talking to? Well, you're talking to people with big checks to cut in all those cases. So it chokes up the entire, it narrows the conversation, and it drowns out people who you might not think that they have translated, their anger into something constructive, but that is a job that elected officials can be good at if you give them a chance. So this is a radical problem, and we really need to think about ways of addressing it and go beyond just campaign finance regulation.
Thank you.
My name's Melissa Moriello. You alluded to the dysfunctionality of the setup of the ballot in Broward County. Why is there not a standard way of setting up ballots across the state? Is it because, obviously it's political, but what is blocking that?
No, actually, in that one, it wasn't political. It was just poor management. You got to remember it was a Democrat who set that up down there, and it killed the Democrat, okay? No, and it killed the Democrat. So it wasn't a political thing. She wasn't trying to do it. She just didn't follow the standard operating procedure. There is a standard operating procedure. 66% of the counties, or 66 of the counties followed it, so it was just a mistake on her end.
Thank you.
My name is Ed Goff, and you've answered most of my questions. I have a rated list here of questions. And my question is, why, money, obviously, we talked about, it's a big issue. Why isn't there some common place that voters can go to see where the candidates stand? In other words, suppose there was a public website, candidates could, on that website, they could tell exactly where they stand on the issues, and they could modify it as a saw fit. And instead of, I find it very difficult to study all the candidates. I get all these flyers, and I get all these robocalls, and I see stuff written in the newspaper, and the League of Women Voters puts out things, and other organizations put out things, and you look at them all and you say, how am I going to make a decision on this? Some are very obvious, but how do the candidates stand on all the important issues? It would be so easy to set up a website and have it funded by the local government, and then the candidates themselves could say where they stand on, say, impact fees. And that would be, you know, either you're for impact fees or you're against impact fees. That's pretty simple. So why isn't something like that being set up? I know you guys are not in charge of something like that, but seems like it would make it so much easier for the voters to make a decision, and people don't like to do that much homework. A lot of people just vote for an R or a D or an I.
The reality is, even as honest as you try to be, your bias will still fall over. Keith Fitzgerald and I, and he will tell you, we were even in the legislature serving together, we agreed on probably 95% of the issues. But your personal bias still follows over to some way. So if you went to a common website or say, that just means that the best liar wins, okay? Because I'm going to tell it with my bias, how I see it. He's going to tell it with his bias. And even though we're agreeing, okay, you still have a bias that is very, very difficult to get out of. The only thing I can do is you take an organization like the League, okay, other organizations who invite speakers down, but when they invite them, whether it's Tiger Bay or whatever it is, ask them to limit the number of people who are going to speak at a given time so you can actually hear what one of them's got to say. They have a meeting down there and they have 8 candidates. Well, nobody gets to say anything, and you don't get to question anybody, okay? So you really don't find out anything. And so I don't know how a website would work any differently. But,
Well, people could go.
I can guarantee I'm a better liar than he is. I'm
People could go to the website at any
older,
time.
okay? Because I'm going to beat him.
People could go to the website at any time. They wouldn't have to go down.
But
to
then
Tiger
who
Bay.
would sponsor that without a bias? There's no such thing
No,
as an
it would
opinion
just
without
be-
bias.
Well, there could be bias. People can read through that. You know,
No.
well,
Yeah,
it's better than not having any information, I think.
let me broaden it, because I think a lot of groups do try to do this, but again, they come with some kind of agenda, and you can get, League does a nice job on constitutional amendment issues, but let me take a sort of a surprising other direction. Our political parties, part of the problem that they don't compete with each other very well is they both become machines for raising money for campaign finance activities. And my party is especially guilty of doing nothing to communicate with their members until about, 8 weeks before the election. So, you had a bunch of white people going into the black community saying, it's Republicans are terrible, you got to do something. We'll see you in 4 years. That's the way it goes. So one of the things we might want to think about is reinvigorating the parties so that if the parties actually had as part of their function having a traveling roadshow where you say, come here, we're going to tell you our point of view, and yeah, it's going to be the Democratic point of view, Republican point of view, but they made it entertaining and it was inclusive and they tried to get everybody involved. And then there were third and fourth parties who are doing the same thing. People are smart enough to figure out who they like and who they prefer and on what basis. But you know, these money campaigns are restricted to ads, a lot of it negative, hit jobs and stuff like that. So, you know, the surprising answer might be, let's reinvigorate the parties, give them the responsibility of getting out what their candidates think. But, you know, this is a decline of the quality of the public sphere. And, you know, the fact that newspapers don't really exist the way they used to is a big part of the problem. We go to Tallahassee now, they've got like maybe 10 reporters covering the legislature. When I arrived in 2006, there was a whole gaggle of them. And it was a little harder to hide the salami when there are a whole bunch of eyes on it. Now you got these 10 people, some are really smart, but they can't track everything. And the bloggers get in the way of the real reporters, so it's all a bunch of sensational stuff. And, you know, so there are a lot of problems that prevent real conversations of real issues. And, you know, we've got to think out of the box on how we solve it.
Let me just point out something else. How many people in here right now can stand up and tell me what channel METV's on? One. Okay? Here you have an unbiased deal, okay, that's available. It records all of the speakers, all of the functions, whether it's here, whether it's in Tiger Bay and all that. But if you don't turn on, there's an unbiased one, and yet most people in this room, as badly as you want new information, cannot tell me the channel it's on. And the information's free. You had a question, and I think she's going to throw us all out of here.
Yeah. My name's Sandra Danu. The question is, do you have any solutions for this signature issue? Because, as we all know, nowadays you can sign a credit card thing with a squiggle, and that's your signature. Nobody would ever recognize it. You can sign, evidently, a document online by just typing your name in. Kids are not learning how to write script any longer. So how are we going to resolve this? And I know it sort of it impacts on that whole issue of paper ballots versus, technology and internet ballots and so forth. So what can be the solution to this?
We push continuously to ask people to update their signatures because it is difficult. The other problem we have is people come down now and they go to get their driver's license, and the clerk says, hey, do you want to vote? And they say, yeah, I want to vote. And they say, just sign this pad. And they sign that pad. You know and I know and everybody in this room knows your signature on that pad doesn't look anything like it. And then in addition to that, in my office, Debbie in my office, who's my administrative assistant, spends 25% of her day, every day, removing people from the voting rolls who do not have a right to be there. Because what happened is when they go in, they don't ask them, are they legal, illegal, are they a representative, if they've ever been a felon. They don't ask them anything. Do you want to vote? Yeah, I'd like to vote. Sign here. Okay? And then they come over as registered voters, and we have to remove them. So, but taking care of the signature is a problem. They don't teach cursive writing. I don't want to go to the purple thumbprint kind of deal, but we're going to have to do something because people, it's an issue.
Yeah, and just remember, people engage in very sensitive, private financial transactions on the internet every day. And there are ways of verifying and authenticating people without scanning their signature. So I don't know exactly how you would apply that technology in this setting, but I got to imagine there's some way to do it. So we should be finding that.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful day. Appreciate the invite. Thank you very much. Oh, good to see you, my friend.